So, well, good morning, everyone. I would like to thank you for the invitation to this workshop. After your presentation, Natalie, I find really interesting, and I hope you like both. Everyone likes the data that I want to show you, and I would like also to thank my colleagues, friends. Some students are here in the meeting that they support the results that I'm going to show today. So, as we started, modern landscape are complex interaction between environment, the human activities, and the current climate. These elements are constantly changing and modifying the others along the time. So the picture we see at the present is a mixture of a historical process that can be recorded in very special places like lakes, swamps, or meadows as a natural archive of past conditions. So I'm going to take you farther south in South America, and particularly in South and Central Chile. Yeah, this is this area has been highly modified by human activities in recent and also in older times. As we see in this picture from Lara et al., by the 16th century, this is the temperate rainforest region, and we see the cover grasses were abundant during that time too. Yeah. However, the most dramatically changes we observe at the present, with the important loss of native forest and the replaced by crops and exotic plantation like pinus and eucalyptus. Yeah, this is despite we notice an important differences between the northern and southern areas in this region. Yeah, we will focus during this talk in the Araucanian region. The Araucanian region, the intensity and the magnitude of the human impact has been quite different in the coastal and also in the Andean areas, as I will show you in the following slides. This is Lago Budi, a brackish lagoon joined to the Pacific Ocean that is currently occupied by the Mapuche, that means people from the land. Yeah, the archaeological records of this impressive raised fields that you can see even from the Google Earth. Yeah, I hope you can see in the image. Yeah, we're providing huge amount of food for the Mapuche that were living inland during the warriors against the Spanish during the 16th and 17th centuries. This period has been called Guerra de Arauco in Spanish. So from lake sediments, I will try to understand, or we try to understand, how the environmental transformation are related to human and climatic forcing. So today I will show you data from Lanalhue, Puren, and Tolhuaca National Park. The pollen record from Lanalhue spans the last 1,800 years. This chronology is based on lead, cesium, and radiocarbon ages. Three main pollen zones are clear along the records. The first one is characterized by the Valdivian forest, like Aretoxicon, Eucryphia, and Nothofagus species. Traces of sea maize and poaceae can be associated with the pre-Hispanic agriculture by local indigenous. The second zone starts with the Spanish arrival by the 16th century, and we observe the dramatically decline of arboreal elements and the expansion of exotic plants like plantago, rumex, and the persistence of poaceae species that are evidence of intensive farming by the settlers who has introduced the wheat and barley crops in the region. Finally, since the 1980s, pine plantations has been subsidized by the Chilean government, representing the major landscape transformation in all South and Central Chile. Also in Lanalhue Lake, we have done the charcoal analysis, and you can see the fire was very frequent during the last 1,000 years and can be associated with the increase of sedimentation rates inside the lake. The modern clear cutting practices from forestry company have increased dramatically the soil loss since the 80s. If we move inland to the Puren-Lumaco Valley, we will have found the most complex interaction between humans and their landscape documented on more than 100 ceremonial mounds they call quell. Here you can see the rewe quell. Every quell has its name, and they are still in use by the Mapuche communities during some special ceremonies. For instance, in the Puren-Lumaco Valley has a cultural relevance by the presence of this quell. These ceremonial mounds were built with soil brought from different parts of the valley. Some of them include burials of important cacique. This is a quell Tren Tren, and here is my son on fieldwork. In all the excavation, they found the presence of archaeobotanical remains such as quinoa, poaceae, sea maize, and they have been dated up to 800 years ago. Only one seed of sea maize had been dated on 2,500 years. So we performed the pollen record of the El Valle site from Puren, and it's covered the 26,000 years, covering the vegetation changes from the last glacial maximum to the Holocene. The most remarkable human trace in these pollen records is the continuous presence of sea maize, Kenupodiaceae, Asteraceae, Solanaceae, and Poaceae pollen taxa since the 4,000 years. So the comparison with the archaeobotanical record gives us a need to improve this data to afford major conditions of how is exactly timing of the more human intense or agriculture in this area. So if we finally move up to the mountains, this is a picture of the extension of the fire during 2002, during the summer. And in the national park, it's called Tolhuaca. The occurrence of fire events recorded by scars by Gonzalez et al. Show very low fire occurrence before the arrival of Spanish. On the contrary, with the data that I have shown you before in the coastal zones, in Lanalhue or in either in Puren, the more intense or the more the fire increased after 1750. So here we start the increase of fire being maximum to the 20th centuries during the Euro-Chilean settlements. So in order to extend this chronology, we studied 2 lakes in the national park, the charcoal accumulation rates, to understand the fire history in a longer perspective. This is the part of the PhD of Alejandra Martel, where a composite curve of two charcoal records show the fire dynamics during the last 2,000 years. A higher fire activity is related to positive sun phases and higher frequency of El Niño type events. This climatic configuration generates extremely hot and dry conditions, allowing large fire events. In the Andes, climatic control seems to play an important role in the vegetation and the fire dynamics. However, the fire activity also can be related to human presence, as is shown by the density of archaeological samples in the nearby of the national park, as we see in the record. Okay, so I just want to finish my talk with the, I want to show you the archaeological and paleontological site that is called Pilaco, and is located in the city of Osorno in southern South America. Pilaco is very interesting because it's characterized by the great abundance of megafauna remains, such as mastodons. Recently, the presence of a human footprint in the sediment dated on 15,000 years has been published by Moreno et al. The radiocarbon ages from Pilaco are comparable to those found in Monteverde site that is a little farther south of this site. So the landscape of Pilaco show a total discrepancy from prevailing forest ecosystem that we found in the region by this time. The presence of open areas, pioneers and disturbed seeds, plants and seeds too, are associated with a disturbed area and open landscape, mainly to megafauna activity. Among the carpological remains or findings, I found a perforated seed during the excavation, and this seed is from Prunopithis andina. There is a tree that is locally extinct, and that must been distributed by the megafauna and also by human by this time. So the early human occupation in southern South America has been the focus of intense debate over the recent years. The human trace found in Pilaco suggests a complex dynamics between climate, human, and environmental changes occurred at the end of the Pleistocene, adding a new line of evidences for the colonization of the northern Patagonia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Anna. Very interesting, your talk. We have 5 minutes for questions.
I would have one, but it might be a very simple, easy question for. I was just wondering on your last slide, you said this is a perforated seed. Is it normally like that, or was it perforated by a human or an animal?
Normally it's not perforated, and we found also perforated seed by rats. But we have compared, I didn't want to extend on this, but we have compared by SEM images, the kind of perforation, and it's quite different from when the perforation comes from a biological or animal, like a rat or other insects, for instance. And also we found little pieces of charcoal inside of the seed, and the color of the seed is different than the seeds from other seeds that we found in the paleontological site. So it's very, very different than the normal ones.
Okay.
And you can find all this data in a book we had published last year, like everything about Pilaco. So I can text it in the chat, so you can see it.
Good.
We
And-
have a
yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, you. I was going to say probably about the chat.
Okay, no, go ahead. Yeah.
So Marie-France Loutre is asking in the chat, is fire increase related to changes in vegetation due to human occupation or to humans setting up fire or to other regions? So what is causing the increase in fire?
Yeah, well, this is always a good question, because of course with fire you never know, or you cannot know directly from the charcoal particles if this fire is set by humans or by natural disasters. But it's also depends on when, because when you compare different sites that they are close enough to represent like local signal of fires, you can also detect like differences and how to explain. My English is rough. And you can compare different trends. So in this kind of forest, up to the mountains, the Araucaria forests are very prone to fire. So they evolve with fire since the Jurassic. So the fire is a constant element in this kind of forest. So we find that fire occurs naturally. There are lightning, for instance, that produce fires, and vegetation is very sensitive. But on the contrary, on coastal areas, the vegetation over there is very wet and is evergreen rainforest. And as is that kind of forest, difficult to burn it. So that this kind of forest needs more energy or more human interest, or more, you can interpret like fire occurring in the west part, or I mean in the wet part of Chile, is more related to the human impact than more in the Andes. That is more difficult to separate the both signals. I don't know if Marie-France, if I answer your question.
Charcoal would be a human trace in one region, but not necessarily in the other.
Exactly. Oh, it's more difficult to separate it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Good.
So good. Great.
We have another question.
Excellent. Thank you very much. There's another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is fire common in the region during La Niña years at the present day? Not really. Not really. At present day, as I told you, fire can be intentionally burned by human activities, but in the large fire events occurs during El Niño years. Because of the winter, it rains a lot, that produce a huge amount of biomass. Then during the spring and summer, it comes very dry in this part of the region. So this fuel is completely flammable to start and to rise a huge and devastating set fires, like in 2002 pictures that I have shown you. But this was by the lightning, for instance. This event was produced by a lightning. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I think there's no more questions.
Is there time for one short question?
Yes.
Sure.
Hi. Hey, Anna. I'm interested in the way that the land was used before 1500, right? So one of your slides said Valdivian forest and farming. Did they do land clearage? So would there be soil erosion pre-1500? Do you have like specific pollen for certain plants, or what does it look like?
Do you mean 5,000 years ago?
So 1500 after date. So before that, so before the Spanish colonization.
Yeah, as I show you in the first slide, all the historical archives for the first Spanish, they speak like in Chile, there were open areas, and these open areas were occupied by the Mapuche local indigenous people, and they used to use fire to open areas and cultivate maize, quinoa, and other crops. So we see that in Lanalhue, for instance, that is very clear. We see these open areas where I expected, if there was no human impact in this lake, I expected 90% of arboreal pollen taxa. But as we see in the record, the arboreal pollen doesn't reach more than 60 or 70%. That's me allow to think like there were open areas. And also I found maize, that is corn, and up to 2,000 years. So this is a signal of the beginning of the agriculture. And also all these archaeological findings that there are at the coast of Lago Budi, these raised fields. I invite you to travel in the Google Earth, because it's really interesting when you see from the air this kind of structure on the land that produce huge amount of food. So that image we have of the pristine ecosystem before the Spanish arrival is off, and those people here was doing a lot of changes too.
Yeah, so the way we see it now is that it was mainly plants, so mainly agriculture, and not a lot of animal keeping. Is that correct?
In Lanalhue, I see agriculture because of maize. This plant grows because of the people. But as I had shown in Pilaco, that is another time, of course, is the late Pleistocene. I see the animal impact because of the megafauna rearranged like ancient engineers, you know, in ecosystem engineers. They change the landscape, they open areas, and afterwards human can use too.
Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to talking more about that later. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Cindy. Nice to see you.
Okay, thank you, Anna, for this really interesting talk. And if you want, we invite you to add your sites to the interactive map, which would be really, really nice to have some sites in Southern South America. Thanks.